When Tilu walked into his mother's grand birthday banquet with his wife Iro beside him, heads turned, not because of what they wore, but because every waiter respectfully called Iro Madam CEO. His mother, who once spat at Iro's feet, went pale, her wineglass trembling mid-air. This wasn't the poor girl she disowned her son for loving. This was the girl she tried to erase. Now, she couldn't ignore her. Tilu had just finished university and came home with a big secret. He was engaged. The girl he wanted to marry wasn't rich or well-known. Her name was Iro. He met her while walking past a roadside art stall. She was sitting there, painting quietly and smiling at everyone who came by. She wasn't just selling art. She was using that little stall to feed her old grandmother. Iro didn't wear fancy clothes or speak in big words, but there was something about her heart, her honesty, and her kindness that made Tilu fall in love. When he introduced her to his mother, matron Sina, everything changed. Sina was a powerful woman. She cared about class, money, and what people would say. She looked at Iro from head to toe and said she was a speck of dust in royal linen. She didn't even try to hide her hate. She told Tilu that Iro wasn't good enough, that he should find someone richer, someone with a big name. But Tilu didn't care about money or fame. He had seen Iro's heart, and that was enough for him. Tilu stood firm. He said he loved Iro and wanted to marry her no matter what. Sina couldn't take it. She told him that if he married that nobody girl, he would no longer be her son. She said he would bring shame to the family, and so she made her choice. Tilu begged her to look past the surface, to give Iro a chance, but Sina turned her back and said, "You're no longer my son." Tilu walked out of the house holding Iro's hand. He had nothing now, not his mother's support, not the family name, not even a home, but Iro held his hand tighter and whispered, "We'll make it, together." And in that moment, under the hot afternoon sun, a new story began, a love that was tested by pride, but rooted in something stronger than gold, faith in each other. Matron Sina didn't cry or beg when Tilu chose to marry Iro. Instead, she planned a grand dinner. But this wasn't a normal family dinner. This was her way of saying goodbye, not with love, but with pride and anger. She called it a farewell dinner, but in truth, it felt more like a funeral. The house was decorated with expensive flowers, shiny lights, and golden plates. Important guests came, family friends, politicians, rich neighbors. They were all dressed in their best, eating and laughing, but they didn't know the real reason behind the gathering. Tilu and Iro arrived, holding hands. Iro had never been in such a big house before. Her simple dress didn't match the glittering crowd. People stared, whispered, and smirked. Iro kept her head low. Tilu squeezed her hand gently, silently telling her, "I'm here." Then Sina stood up in front of everyone. She raised her glass, smiled coldly and said, "Today, we say goodbye to my son. He's no longer part of this family. He chose gutter love over our royal name. From this day, he is dead to me." The room went quiet for a second. Then, laughter filled the air. Some guests clapped. Others made jokes. They looked at Iro with mocking eyes, shaking their heads. Iro's hand trembled in Tilu's. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Tilu didn't say a word. He looked at his mother, then at the guests, then turned around slowly. Still holding Iro's hand, he walked away from the table, away from the house, away from everything he had known since childhood. Behind them, the mocking grew louder. People laughed as if they were watching a scene in a movie. Sina smiled proudly, believing she had taught her son a lesson, but Tilu didn't look back. Iro's feet moved fast, her heart beating loud. She had never felt so small, so unwanted, but Tilu didn't let go of her hand, not even once. They walked down the long driveway in silence, the noise of laughter fading behind them. Outside the gate, Iro finally looked at Tilu. Her eyes asked 100 questions, but Tilu just gave her a small smile and nodded. "Let them laugh," his eyes seemed to say. "We have each other." That night, they didn't go to any hotel. They didn't have a fancy car. They took a small bus back to the little room they now called home. No one welcomed them. No one celebrated. But in that silence, something stronger than anger was born. A promise that they would prove everyone wrong, not with words, but with their journey. After leaving the grand house and everything behind, Tilu and Iro moved into a small room in Iro's compound. It wasn't much. The roof leaked whenever it rained. The walls were old and cracked. There was no bed, just one thin mat on the floor, where they both slept side by side. There was no fridge, no wardrobe, not even a table, just a small stove, 2 plates, and the quiet sound of struggle. But in that tiny space, there was love. They would sit on the mat, eat together from one plate, and laugh at little things. Sometimes they had only bread and water for dinner. Other times they skipped meals. But Tilu never complained. He would hold Ero's hand and say, "One day, we'll look back and smile at this." They would talk about their dreams, opening a small art shop, building a name, proving that love and hard work were enough. At night, they made candles together. Ero had learned it from her grandmother. Tilu helped her melt the wax, pour it into old tins, and wrap the finished candles in brown paper. They sold them in the local market during the day. On weekends, Tilu painted portraits of people who passed by. Ero would stand beside him and call out to customers, sometimes offering to paint for free, just to show their talent. It wasn't easy. Many people walked past without stopping. Some laughed, asking, "Is this the life you left your mansion for?" But still, they didn't give up. At the same time, far away in the city, Sina's daughter Noro had a big wedding. She married a rich land merchant. The wedding was on every page of the local magazine. Gold decorations, diamond jewelry, imported food. Everything was perfect. Sina posted pictures, smiling proudly with her son-in-law. People praised her, saying, "This is true class." But while Noro was wearing gold, Tilu and Ero were learning to build with their hands. They didn't have luxury, but they had each other. Every candle they sold, every painting they finished, gave them hope. Slowly, they saved a little money. Ero bought a second-hand sewing machine. Tilu bought better brushes. Their room was still small, but it was full of purpose. Some nights, when it rained and the roof leaked, they would move the mat to the corner and sit close. Ero would place her head on Tilu's shoulder and whisper, "We will rise." Tilu would nod and whisper back, "Together." And in that small room, with nothing but a mat on the floor, they began building a life that would one day make even their enemies pause in silence. Noro, Tilu's sister, lived like a queen. She posted pictures every day, wearing gold, holding designer bags, standing beside her rich husband. People online praised her beauty, her lifestyle, and her perfect marriage. She would often laugh at Ero's simple clothes and poor background, calling her names behind her back. To many, Noro's life looked like a dream, but behind those shiny photos, a storm was growing. Her husband had a dangerous habit, gambling. Slowly, he started losing money. First, it was small, but soon it became big. He took loans from people in the dark corners of the city. Then, to pay off those loans, he entered fraud deals, stealing people's land and lying to business partners. One day, the truth came out. He was caught in a fraud case, and before the police could arrest him, he ran away, just disappeared. Nora woke up one morning to see her husband gone, and their house surrounded by angry people demanding money. The cars, the jewelry, everything was taken. She had nothing left. In shame, she returned to her mother, Sina, with empty hands and a broken heart. Sina, who once boasted about her rich son-in-law, now sat in silence, not knowing what to say. The same people who praised Noro now gossiped about her fall. While all this happened, Ero stayed quiet. She never smiled at Noro's pain, never said a word. Instead, she focused on her art. One day, she joined a small village art competition. She painted a picture of her and Tilu on a rainy day, holding hands under a broken roof, with light coming from a candle between them. That painting touched many hearts. She won first prize. Among the judges was a quiet old woman named Madame Jula. No one knew much about her, but she had once been a famous designer, someone who painted with queens and trained artists across Africa. After the competition, she walked up to Ero and said, "Your hands speak louder than your words. Come work with me." Ero couldn't believe it. Madame Jula took her in like a daughter, teaching her everything she knew: color, detail, storytelling through design. Ero began to shine in ways no one expected. She didn't need to post anything online. Her work spoke for itself. Slowly, people in the village began to notice her name, not because she was Tilu's wife, but because she was a rising star in art and fashion. While Nora was trying to fix her broken life, Ero was quietly building hers. And this time, the world started watching, not out of gossip, but out of respect. Even after everything his family did, Tilu never said bad things about them. He never insulted his mother or sister. not in public, and not even in private. When Ero once asked why he stayed so quiet, he smiled gently and said, "Let's rise," without shouting. Those words stayed in Ero's heart. They both decided to focus only on their growth, not on proving anyone wrong with words. With the little savings from their candle and art business, they rented a small space near the village market. They named it Ink and Clay. Ero designed the shop with her own hands, painting the walls, arranging the candles, and hanging her small art pieces. Tilu handled the money and spoke to customers. The shop was simple but beautiful, and people slowly started coming in, first out of curiosity, then out of love for their work. Their designs were different. Ero combined African patterns with modern touches. People from nearby towns started visiting. Soon, a second shop opened in another village, then a third. By the second year, Ink and Clay had become a name people trusted. Everyone loved the products, but no one knew who the real creator was. They thought it was just a business, run by some unknown company. Ero never put her name or picture on anything. She stayed behind the scene. She didn't want fame. She wanted peace. She remembered Tilu's words, without shouting, so they kept growing quietly. Tilu managed things from the front, and Ero created magic from the back. Madame Hula would often visit and guide her like a mother, helping her improve every piece. By the fourth year, Ink and Clay became more than just a shop. It became a brand. Stores started popping up in small cities. Customers wore their designs with pride. Celebrities started buying their candles and sharing pictures without even knowing who made them. Ero watched all this from her quiet workspace, smiling at every step, but never stepping into the spotlight. Even the media began asking, "Who owns Ink and Clay?" But no one gave an answer. Tilu and Ero stayed silent. They didn't need to explain. Their work was speaking for them. Their silence was powerful. While others chased attention, they built a legacy. Tilu always reminded Ero, "Let's be the kind of people who don't shout to be seen," and she listened. Together, they created something big, something beautiful, without ever needing a stage, applause, or praise. Their map to success was drawn in silence, but it led straight to the hearts of many. One morning, as Ero was arranging candles in their workshop, a delivery man arrived with a shiny, gold-edged envelope. It looked expensive, with elegant handwriting and a royal seal. Tilu opened it slowly. It was an invitation, a grand one. It was from his mother, Matron Sina. She was turning 60 and throwing a birthday banquet at the biggest hall in the city. Inside the envelope was a small note, written in her bold, cold style. It said, "You may attend if you still remember your name." Tilu stood there, staring at the paper. His hands began to shake a little. It had been years since he left that house, since he was called her son. This note didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like a challenge, like his mother still wanted to show that he had made the wrong choice, that he had forgotten where he came from. Ero read the note quietly. She didn't cry. She didn't speak much. She simply nodded and said, "Let's go. It's time." They didn't rush. They took their time getting ready, not with gold or diamonds, but with quiet strength. Ero wore a simple dress she made herself. Nothing loud, but every thread told a story. Tilu wore a calm look on his face. No anger, no fear. They weren't going to show off. They were just going to walk in, together. That day, they closed their shop early and left their workers in charge. The roads were busy, the city noisy, but their car ride was silent. Not because they were nervous, but because their hearts were steady. They had worked hard, stayed silent, and built something real. They didn't need to speak. Their presence alone would say everything. As the banquet hall came into view, Tilu took a deep breath. Ero gently held his hand and he looked at her. She gave a small nod again. That was all he needed. Together, they walked toward the place that once rejected them, not to prove anything with anger, but to simply be seen. The same people who had laughed at them would be there. The same mother who once said he was dead to her was now inviting him again. But they didn't go for revenge. They went because it was time. Time for the world to see who they had become. Not because of money, not because of titles, but because of quiet strength, hard work, and the kind of love that never needed to shout. The banquet hall was full of noise, laughter, and shining clothes. Important people were everywhere, holding drinks, greeting Matron Sina, and waiting to see the show she always put on. Everyone knew her 60th birthday would be grand. She had planned it to be the talk of the town, but what no one expected was the moment Ero walked in. She didn't come in loudly. There was no music, no spotlight, no grand entrance. Just a quiet walk through the golden doors, holding Tilu's hand. But as soon as they entered, the room slowly began to change. The music faded, conversations paused, all eyes turned to her, not because of her dress or jewelry, but because of the way every single waiter stopped what they were doing, bowed gently and said, "Good evening, Madam CEO." People blinked, confused. Madam CEO. Sina, standing near the cake, froze. She heard it too. She turned slowly and saw Ero walking across the room with calm steps and a peaceful face. Her heart started racing. That same girl she once called a gutter girl, that same girl she disowned her son for, was being called Madam CEO. Whispers began filling the air like smoke. "Isn't that Tilu's wife?" someone said. "No way. That's the owner of Ink and Clay," another added. "The art empire that's all over the country. She's the face behind it." The questions kept coming, and the answers shocked everyone. Some guests began pulling out their phones, searching online. Pictures matched. Names matched. It was true. The girl they once looked down on had become something no one saw coming. Ero, the quiet one, was the powerful woman behind one of the fastest growing brands in the region. Sina's face slowly turned pale. Her strong hands that once pushed Ero away were now shaking. She couldn't speak. She couldn't smile. She just watched as her guests turned their attention from her to the woman she tried to erase. Ero didn't speak much. She didn't greet everyone loudly. She simply walked with quiet dignity, nodding politely at those who stared. She didn't need to say, "Look at me now." The moment spoke for her. Tilu stood beside her with pride in his eyes. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just held her hand, just like he did on the day they left with nothing. In that big hall filled with gold and noise, the loudest presence was a woman who walked in quietly and let the truth walk in before her. The music slowly returned to the hall, but the atmosphere had changed. People couldn't stop whispering about Ero. Waiters continued calling her Madam CEO, and guests who once laughed at her name were now staring with wide eyes, wondering how they had missed such a powerful truth. But the biggest surprise hadn't come yet. Soon, it was time to unveil the birthday cake. A grand moment Matron Sina had planned carefully. The cake was huge, placed at the center of the hall, covered with a silk cloth. Two men rolled it forward, while everyone clapped and turned their attention to the stage. Sina smiled and raised her glass, expecting something beautiful, something that would remind everyone of her power and grace. But when the cloth was lifted, her smile disappeared. The entire cake was a piece of art, not just with icing and cream, but with a hand-painted design that looked like it belonged in a gallery. It was bright, bold, and unforgettable. At the very center of the cake was a small golden tag, designed and sponsored by Ink and Clay. Sina's hand shook. She looked closer, and that's when she saw it. Ero's signature mark, hidden gently in the corner of the cake design. It was the same mark that was now printed on candle boxes, paintings, fabric, and store signs across cities. The same design Sina had once called useless art. Now, it was on her own birthday cake. The guests started clapping, amazed by the beauty and class of the cake. Some turned to Ero and nodded in respect. Others whispered, "She even sponsored the cake for this event." It was no longer just a moment of celebration. It was a message, clear and loud. Sina stood frozen. Her wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor, but she didn't even flinch. Her eyes were locked on the cake, then on Ero. She saw not just a woman in a dress, but the same girl who once stood outside her gate, holding Tilu's hand, begging for a chance. The girl she had mocked, the girl she said would never become anything, the girl she refused to accept. And now, this girl didn't just walk into her banquet, she sponsored the most important part of it. Sina's hands went cold. Her face had no color. She saw guests turning away from her and moving toward Ero. She felt the shift. Respect was no longer in her direction. It had moved. She had tried to erase Ero's name, but now that name was written in gold on a cake in front of everyone. She had tried to block the gate, but now the girl she rejected owned the gate itself. After the banquet slowly came to an end, guests began leaving the hall still whispering about what they had seen. People had come to celebrate Matron Sina, but they were leaving with stories about Ero, The girl they once ignored, the woman they now respected. The music faded, the lights dimmed, and the once loud hall became quiet. Sina stood still near the stage, her eyes searching the room, not for guests, but for her son. She finally found him, standing near the back with Ero. They were holding hands and smiling gently, talking to a few well-wishers. Tilu looked peaceful, as if the years of pain and rejection had been replaced by something stronger. Ero looked calm and graceful, not angry, not proud, just sure of who she was. Sina walked toward them slowly. Her steps were not firm like before. Her shoulders were not straight. She looked smaller than usual, almost unsure. When she reached Tilu, her voice shook a little. She looked into her son's eyes and said softly, "You never told me." Tilu looked at her. For a moment the room felt still again. Then he answered, "You never asked." Those 4 words hung in the air, heavier than anything else said that night. They weren't loud, but they were sharp, a quiet truth that filled the whole room. People nearby paused, some turning their heads to listen. Sina didn't respond. She just stood there, taking in the weight of those words. Tilu didn't say more. He turned to Ero, still holding her hand, and looked at her with love and respect. Then he said, loud enough for his mother to hear, "This is the only family I'll ever fight for again." There was no anger in his voice, no revenge, just peace. A strong kind of peace that comes after surviving storms and staying true to love. Ero's eyes softened. She gently squeezed his hand. Sina stood there, speechless. The son she once disowned had not only survived, but had also risen higher than she ever imagined, and he did it without her. Around them, people watched quietly. Some nodded, some looked away. Everyone felt the moment. Sina had thrown him away thinking he would fail, but he didn't. She had judged Ero as nothing, but she became everything. Tilu didn't beg to come back. He didn't try to fix anything. He simply reminded her, with calm words and a steady heart, that the love he once offered freely was no longer hers to reject. And in that moment, Sina understood she had lost more than just a son. She had lost a chance to witness greatness from the start. Years later, in a quiet home filled with warm light and soft laughter, a painting hangs on the living room wall. It's simple but powerful. The painting shows a woman walking alone in the rain. Her feet are bare, her clothes are soaked. She holds a rolled mat under one arm, shielding it from the storm. There's no umbrella, no shoes, no luxury, just a quiet strength in the way she walks, head held high, steady and calm. A little boy, no older than 7, stands beneath the painting, staring up at it with curious eyes. He tugs at Ero's dress and asks, "Mama, who is she?" Ero looks at the painting for a long moment. Her eyes soften with memories that don't need to be said out loud. Then she kneels beside the boy and smiles gently. "She's someone your father gave everything up for," Ero says quietly, "and in return, he gained the world." The boy doesn't understand the full meaning yet, but something in his mother's voice tells him this woman was important, strong, brave, loved. The camera pulls back slowly. There's no loud music, no dramatic monologue, no big social media message, no angry revenge speech, just a home filled with peace, love, and quiet dignity. The walls don't show signs of battles won through shouting or pride. They show growth, they show resilience, they show grace. And that one painting of a barefoot woman walking through the rain with nothing but a mat and her quiet courage tells a whole story without a single word. It's a story that doesn't need to scream to be remembered, because real power never shouts. It simply walks in and is recognized. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll without sharing it. Tag someone who needs to remember. True power isn't loud. It's calm, steady, and unforgettable.